The note was folded twice and pushed under my bedroom door sometime after midnight, because it wasn't there when I went to sleep, and it was there when I woke up. 6 words, in handwriting I'd been reading for 14 months. Stop being so easy to fall in love with. No signature. She always signed her notes. That was the first thing I noticed, that for once, she hadn't. The second thing I noticed was that my hands weren't steady. I sat on the edge of the bed holding a square of paper smaller than my palm, and somewhere in those 6 words, the last 14 months, quietly stopped being what I'd been telling myself they were. Let me back up. Because to understand why that note nearly stopped my heart, you have to understand how careful 2 people can be for over a year, and how that carefulness is sometimes just love wearing a coat. My name is Daniel Cole. I'm 34, and I fix furniture for a living. Old chairs, water-warped tables, the kind of pieces people inherit and can't bring themselves to throw out but can't quite use either. I'm good with things that are broken in ways that don't show. I work alone in a rented workshop that smells of linseed oil and sawdust. And for most of my adult life, I came home to an apartment that was quiet, in the way that stops being peaceful and starts being a kind of sound on its own. So one spring I posted an ad for a roommate. Her name was Nora Kessler. She answered the ad, came to look at the spare room, and the first thing she ever said to me, before hello, before her own name, was that I'd written looking for a quite professional instead of quiet, and that if I was going to advertise for silence, I should at least spell it. She was a proofreader. She read other people's sentences for a living and physically could not stop reading mine. She was small and quick and never sat all the way back in a chair, like she might need to leave at any second. She wore reading glasses she kept pushed up into her hair and almost never actually lowered onto her face. Her fingers were always faintly stained blue along the side, where a pen had leaked, or her hand had dragged through wet ink, and she left notes, post-its, torn receipts, the backs of envelopes, on every flat surface in the apartment, because she decided in the first week that talking before coffee was a form of assault. I told myself the notes were just Nora being Nora. That's the part I'd like you to hold on to. The notes were just Nora being particular. That is what I told myself, with real conviction, for 14 months. It started, the way these things always do, with someone else's bad idea. Marcus from the workshop believed loneliness was a plumbing problem, something you could fix with enough pressure and the right fitting, and one Friday he set me up with a woman named Claire, who was perfectly nice and perfectly forgettable, which is a worse combination than it sounds. The restaurant was too warm and smelled of garlic and other people's cologne, and somewhere around the second course I realized I was describing, in some detail, the way Nora alphabetized the spice rack, and then re-alphabetized it by how often we used things, and that Claire's smile had gone politely flat. I came home early, earlier than a good date ends. The kitchen light was on. Nora was at the counter in an oversized cardigan that wasn't hers. It had been her father's, I'd learn later, eating cereal at 11 at night like a teenager, glasses finally down on her nose for once, a manuscript spread out in front of her, covered in her small blue corrections. "You're back," she said. And then, too fast. That was fast. It was a date, not a hostage situation. She laughed once, but it came out wrong, a half beat early, and she looked back down at the page like the sentence she'd been fixing had suddenly gotten very interesting. How was she? Nice. Nice, Nora repeated, in the exact tone she used for the word however when a writer leaned on it too hard. I poured a glass of water I didn't want. Behind me I heard her pen start moving again, and then stop. Just stop. The room held still for a second longer than a room should. "Good night, Daniel," she said, quietly, to the page. In the morning there was a note stuck to the coffee tin. "You're out of the good beans. Also glad it was just nice. The world has enough nice. N." I read it twice. I told myself I read it twice because of the dash before glad, which was doing a lot of work for one piece of punctuation. I kept the note. I told myself I keep all of them. I do not keep all of them. I throw most of them away the second I've read them, the way you throw away anything that's only information. But that one went into the drawer in my workbench at the shop, the one where I keep the small screws and the brass hinges and the things I might need later and probably won't. I told myself it was the spice rack joke I was keeping. The reader of this, you, already knows it wasn't the joke. After that, I started noticing the notes differently, which is a polite way of saying I started waiting for them. They had always been functional. "Bins go out Tuesday," the landlord called. "You snore, it's fine, it's almost soothing, like a small, angry boat." But they began arriving with a different weather to them. Saw a chair on the curb on 9th that's exactly your kind of hopeless. Brought it home. It's on the porch. You're welcome. I went out and there it was, a wrecked oak-side chair with a split seat. The kind of thing only I would want, the kind of thing she would have had to carry 4 blocks alone. One evening I came home and found a crumpled note in the kitchen bin, balled up tight, and I am not proud that I uncrumpled it. It was a first draft. The same 6 words I'd find under my door weeks later, except this version had been started and abandoned 3 times. Stop crossed out. Then please stop. Then just stop being. And then nothing. The rest torn off. I stood in the kitchen with a piece of trash in my hand, my heart doing something complicated, and I did the most cowardly possible thing. I put it back. I smoothed it out as best I could and dropped it back in the bin and told myself I'd misread it, that it was a line from a manuscript, that proofreaders carry other people's sentences around with them all day. That, I'd like to note, is hiding with better branding. Her sister visited that weekend. Same sharp mouth, less armor. We were doing dishes, Nora washing, me drying, the window over the sink gone dark and steamed, and the sister Priya said to me, easy as anything, "You know she turned down the place in Glenwood, right? Bigger room, her own bathroom, half the rent." She dried her hands on a towel, said the commute was bad. The commute is 12 minutes. Nora's hand went still in the gray water. Not dramatically, just still. "Priya," she said, in a voice that had dropped just a little. And Priya, blessedly, changed the subject to a cousin's wedding, and I dried the same plate for much longer than a plate requires drying. I have poor survival instincts around women who correct my grammar. This was not, by any measure, a recommended life choice. I made it anyway. The evidence kept arriving, the way it does once you finally start counting. She began cooking too much. I made extra. It's labeled, "Eat it or I'll be insulted." And the extra was always the thing I'd mentioned liking once, weeks earlier, in passing. A detail she'd filed away while I wasn't watching. She started staying up until I got home from the shop, then pretending the late hour was about her manuscripts and not about the door. One night I came in and her laptop was open on the counter, and she lunged to close it. And I caught half a second of the screen, a note app, a list. My name at the top of it. And under my name, a column of small entries I'll never know the contents of, and have never asked. She slapped it shut and dared me with her eyes to say a word. I didn't. I have a strong sense of self-preservation about exactly one thing in my life, and it is Nora Kessler's privacy. What undid me, in the end, wasn't anything she did on purpose. It was the phone call. She thought I was still at the shop. I'd come home for a tape measure and heard her in her room, talking low, that softer register people only use with the people who've known them longest. "No," she was saying. "No, Mom. I'm not going to say anything, because then it's a hole, because then it can't go back to normal if he doesn't." A pause. "Because he's the first place that's ever felt like a place, okay? And I am not going to be the one who burns it down just because She stopped. I'd made the floorboard by the hall closet do the thing it does. There was a silence on her end that had a hell breath in it. I left without the tape measure, very quietly, and stood in the stairwell for a while, being a coward with excellent hearing. My domestic habits, I reflected, were becoming threatening. I had memorized which floorboard betrayed me and used it as a doorbell. That is not the comforting version of a man in love. It is the accurate one. There was a night near the end of all my not knowing when neither of us said anything at all. The power went out in the building, a transformer somewhere. The whole street dark. And we ended up in the kitchen by the light of a candle she'd been saving for a power outage exactly like this one. Because Nora prepared for things. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinets. She sat on the floor across from me, with her back against the oven, her knees up, her father's cardigan sleeves pulled down over her hands. The candle threw everything gold and uncertain. I could smell the wax and the rain just starting outside, and the faint clean paper smell that always came off her hair. Neither of us reached for a phone. Neither of us suggested a flashlight. We just sat there in a darkness that had given us permission, and I caught myself doing the thing I do with furniture, reading her for the joins. The places where the original maker's intention showed through under everything that had been done to her since. The careful way she held herself a fraction apart from every room. The wit she'd built like a railing around something she didn't want anyone leaning on. I'd spent 14 months restoring strangers' broken chairs, and somehow never once said out loud the obvious thing about the person I came home to, which was that I wanted to be the surface she finally put something down on. She turned the candle a slow quarter turn on the floor, watching the wax pool tilt and find its level, and I watched the light move across her face and thought about how many evenings I'd already spent exactly like this, without admitting that they were the best part of my day. The radiator ticked as it cooled. Outside, a car hissed by through the new rain. She looked up and held my eyes for 1 second longer than felt safe, and then looked back down at the flame. Her fingers tightened once around the cuff of her sleeve. I thought very clearly and very calmly, "Oh, there it is. It's been here the whole time." "Daniel," she said, finally, to the candle and not to me. "Do you ever think we got the order of things wrong?" "What order?" "People are supposed to fall first and live together after." She turned the candle a quarter turn on the floor, watching the wax pool shift. We did it backwards. It was the first true thing either of us had said in 14 months, and it was so well disguised that a less attentive man could have called it small talk. I did not call it small talk. But the lights chose that exact moment to come back on, flooding everything ordinary again, and she stood up too quickly and said something about her early shift, and the moment closed like a door in a draft. Which brings me back to the note under my door. I found her the next morning in the kitchen, the manuscript pushed aside, both hands around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She didn't turn around. She'd heard me coming. She always heard me coming, and she'd decided to face the window instead of me, which told me she already knew I'd read it. "I wrote that at 2 a.m, she said to the glass, "which is the only time of day I'm honest, and I hate it." She breathed out. "I changed it after the night you came home early from that date and looked relieved to see me. I'd been keeping a list in my head of all the reasons it would be a disaster. You're my roommate. You're tidy in a way that would eventually annoy me. You alphabetize wrong. A small, wrecked laugh. And then you came home and the list just stopped mattering. And I've been deleting it line by line ever since. And last night I got to the bottom and there was nothing left to be afraid of except the one thing I was actually afraid of. She set the mug down. Which is this. Right now. The part where I have to find out what your face is doing. I didn't trust myself to make my face do anything sensible, so I told the truth about that too. My face is about 14 months behind my chest, I said. Give it a minute. Something in my chest went still, then dropped, the way the floor of an elevator does for half a second. I'd spent 14 months being careful, and the body knows the truth before the mouth will sign off on it, and mine had clearly known for ages. Because it wasn't surprised. It was just relieved. The way you're relieved to finally set down something you didn't realize you'd been carrying. I made myself slow down. Nora, I waited until she turned. Her glasses were up in her hair. Her eyes were doing the thing where she refused to let them do anything. You don't have to mean it, I said. You can blame the 2 a.m. We can put the note in the bin with the other one and never talk about it again, and I'll buy the good beans, and we go back to normal. If that's what you want, say so, and it's already done. I gave her the door. It mattered that I gave her the door. She didn't take it. She set the mug down, too hard, a little coffee jumping the rim, and she crossed her arms over her father's cardigan, and she said, I don't want the good beans, Daniel. I want the version where I stop pretending the commute is the reason I stayed. So I told her the truth, the way she'd earned. Not I love you, that's the easy sentence, the one that means everything and therefore nothing. I told her the specific thing. Every place I've ever lived went quiet when I came home. Yours doesn't. You leave a paper trail of yourself on every surface, so that even when you're at work, I'm not actually alone in here. I kept the note about the beans. It's in a drawer at the shop with the brass hinges I saved for furniture I haven't found yet. I shrugged, because my hands had run out of anything else to do. I think I've been saving that note for you. She crossed the kitchen, and she didn't grab me, and I didn't grab her. She stopped close enough that I could lower my forehead to hers, slowly giving her every inch to step back. And she didn't step back. Her hand came up and held my wrist, fingers stained faintly blue, and we stood there breathing in a kitchen that smelled of cold coffee and rain, 14 months late and exactly on time. Then her phone buzzed on the counter, hard, 3 times in a row, and we both flinched and looked. It was a text from Priya. It said, in all capitals, "Did he find the note yet? Or do I have to come over and read it to him?" Nora laughed, a real one this time, in the right key, and pressed her face into my shoulder, and I realized her whole family had been waiting on this longer than I had. 3 months later, she still left me notes, except now some of them weren't corrections. Coffee's good. So are you. Annoyingly, I taped that one inside the cabinet door where only I would see it. The first weeks were careful in a new way. We kept knocking on doors that no longer needed knocking on. Kept saying, is this okay, about things that were very obviously okay. 2 people learning to stand in a closeness they'd been rationing for over a year. She still didn't sit all the way back in chairs. But she started leaving her glasses down on her nose around me, which I came to understand was its own kind of confession, that she'd stopped feeling like she might need to leave at any second. A year after that, the spare room had quietly become an office, and the chair from the curb on 9th sat finished and oiled by the window, and she read her manuscripts in it with her feet tucked under her and a pen behind her ear and her father's cardigan. which was now openly mine to be cold in too. We argued about the spice rack. She still made too much food and labeled it and got insulted if I didn't eat it. I still snored like a small angry boat. It's still almost soothing, the note on the bathroom mirror informed me. Like a slightly bigger angry boat now, congratulations. Nothing about us had really changed. Except that now, when the power went out, neither of us pretended we needed two separate candles. Years later, when people ask how we got together, she tells the funny version. He couldn't spell quiet. And I let her. Because it's true, and it gets the laugh. But the version I keep is the one in the drawer with the brass hinges. 6 words, no signature, slid under a door at 2 a.m. by the only person who ever made my apartment stop being quiet. She tells people I was easy to fall in love with. She has never once told them she was the one who left the evidence. It wasn't sudden. It had probably always been her. It just, one night, finally stopped hiding. So tell me, what would you have done if you found a note like that under your door from the person you live with? Would you have knocked? Or would you have spent the whole night pretending you hadn't read it? And have you ever loved someone slowly, quietly, for so long that you forgot it had a name? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. If this one found you somewhere tender, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.